On today's show,
In college is probably the first place that I experienced and that I think students experience good retorts to their faith or
oh,
good reasoning for other options. And then not only does that happen, but you meet people that are unique, creative, special,
hmm
who are thinkers, and they live differently from you. They don't have your faith. So when you experience something like that, your faith gets challenged. And so more than not, I see a lot of students have a faith crisis. And this is where they start to question their faith because they realize how much of what I believe is tied to the environment I was in. And that can wreck your world. I think students need to have a faith crisis. They also need to have a community to have that crisis. Because what a faith crisis does is allows your faith to become more real if you would dive deeper into Jesus. And
yeah.
I think that's what InterVarsity provided, a place to ask questions and then have people who are willing to give answers and are willing to walk with you as you question. And I would probably say a lot of students walk away from faith in college because they don't have that community.
Welcome to Education Today. I'm your host, Soko Sholanke. I spent 15 years as a secondary English teacher, and I've also been on the other side as a parent of 3 children who have completed the formal schooling years of kindergarten through 12th grade and are now in the college and career stage. Now I'm here to have conversations with teachers, students, administrators, parents, and other stakeholders about all things education. Join me as I cover current topics in education from preschool through to college, career, and beyond. So, welcome to today's show. My guest today is the Honorable Bradford Everett. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Thank you, Soka. It's good to be here. Finally made it. I'm
Yeah,
glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And Brad is here today to talk to us about campus ministries on college and university campuses. So,
Yeah.
let's begin. But tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
Yeah, my name is Brad, like she said. Most people call me Brad. Husband of one wife. Her name is Stephanie Everett, a beautiful Haitian woman. Father to 2 kids. One named Timothy. The other one name is Langston. And so my oldest is 12, my youngest is 7.
Yeah.
And we are a family full of introverts and one extrovert. That's my youngest. And so he keeps us on our toes. I'm more in the middle, but everybody
Oh,
else.
you have a really beautiful family.
Oh, appreciate
Yeah,
that.
beautiful family. So you work in campus ministries. So tell us about how long you've
Mm.
done that and what type of roles that you've held in that field and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so there's a number of campus ministries out there. I work for the campus ministry called InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. I've been doing that for about 15 years now.
hmm
Uh, and so I was a part of it all the while I was a student. I was a part of InterVarsity chapter at the University of South Florida in Tampa.
hmm
And so, yeah, I mean, did it when I was a student. And then shortly after college, went and decided to come on staff. Felt like that was the call of God on my life. If
Yeah.
that's the best way to say it. I got a degree in computer science
Oh,
at
I did not
the
know that.
University of South Florida. Yeah. And so, but somewhere in that, during getting that degree, I knew I wasn't going to be sitting down and writing code all my life,
hmm
or trying to figure out what code to write. Not that field was terrible. It's just God had a different plan for my life. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, shortly after, decided to come on staff. And basically, what I loved about InterVarsity is that they were interested in taking Jesus seriously,
Yeah.
not taking ourselves too seriously,
hmm
embodying, teaching students to lead. So it wasn't just somebody coming on campus and telling you all the things you need to do, but they actually, one of the best things I think InterVarsity does is train students to be leaders on campus,
hmm
with the goal of seeing them be leaders in the world, Jesus-centered leaders in the world. And so all of my time on university has been towards that goal.
Yeah.
And probably the thing that's why I'm on. The thing that keeps me is that university tries to. There is significant effort in making sure we embody the whole gospel.
Yeah.
So we don't just say get saved and that's it. It's get saved, but understand who Jesus is, his heart for reconciliation, his heart for justice, his heart for families, his
Hmm.
full heart.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, I've been doing that for a while now, for 15 years. Started as the campus staff at University of South Florida. And then after a few years, became an area director where I oversaw Pasco, Hernando, Hillsborough, Manatee, and Sarasota counties.
Hmm.
And then I moved on to a national position with Black Campus Ministries, which is part of InterVarsity. After doing that for a few years, now I am the regional director for the Southeast. So now I oversee Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and the small panhandle of Florida that includes Pensacola.
Oh, okay. But you don't live in that area anymore, right?
I do not live in the area. You know what? It's a new work environment these days.
Hmm.
Ever since the pandemic,
Yeah.
virtual becoming more normalized,
Yes.
it just became a new uh a new day for us. So
Yeah.
no, I live in the DC area actually. Now let's get this right. I am a Florida boy through and through.
Fort Myers? Is that where you were born
Fort,
and bred?
Fort Myers, that's how they call it. Fort Myers.
Fort Myers. Oh, okay. I did not know that. Excuse me. Sorry. Yeah.
That's all good. And
Yeah.
yeah, so lived in Florida all my life before I moved up here to DC.
Okay.
The DC area. People in
Okay.
DC might get at me if they hear me saying DC, and I really live in Columbia, Maryland.
The
So,
DMV area, right?
yeah, DMV area. That's where
Yeah.
I live
All
now. But because of the ability to be remote, uh, I oversee the Southeast, and so it just involves a number of virtual meetings and some travel.
right. Okay. Yeah. So where in America or even in the world does InterVarsity exist?
All right, now that's a question that I can give you a very very long explanation or a quick explanation. So, the quick explanation is it exists. InterVarsity exists throughout the U.S.
Okay.
Um, and so that's the quick explanation. The maybe more involved, not super long explanation is that InterVarsity is actually a member of oh my God, the International Fellowship of Evangelical Students.
I
I was going
see.
to say they gonna get on me if some InterVarsity people hear me and I can't say that.
Yeah.
But the International Fellowship of Evangelical Students, and that is a network of college ministries around the world.
Oh, I
And
see.
so InterVarsity is actually not the biggest movement uh, in the world that's a part of the IFES. Actually, the biggest college movement, I believe, is still in Nigeria. Somebody may correct me for that, but
Oh,
I know it's one of the movement in Africa that's actually the biggest.
it would make sense since Nigeria is also nicknamed God's own country.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's a privilege to be a part of that network, um, and our movement in the U.S. Is called InterVarsity, and so InterVarsity is in a number of states. I'm actually thinking we might be in every state now,
Hmm.
just about. But we serve about 49,000 students across the nation, and we're on about 700 campuses
Oh, okay. That's a lot.
across the nation. So yeah, InterVarsity is all over the place. And if we're not there, there's probably some InterVarsity staff that is willing to talk with somebody to help us get to a campus if we're not there.
I see. So what is Black Campus Ministries?
Yeah. So this is what InterVarsity knows. So InterVarsity is very committed to racial reconciliation, diversity, but we also know that that doesn't just come naturally.
Hmm.
And so there has to be some intentional efforts to ensure not only are we growing in our abilities to be diverse, but that we're also growing in real reconciliation, but also that we're doing quality work, that
Yeah.
we're not just promoting a Christianity that induces assimilation.
Yeah.
We're growing in a ministry that the diversity that grows in our movement helps us mature and changes the movement, right?
Hmm.
So in order to do that, we need certain ministries to ensure the quality of our ministry in certain areas. And
Okay.
so Black Campus Ministries is a ministry within the InterVarsity family that helps InterVarsity reach Black students. And so, while the purpose and mission of InterVarsity is to establish at college and universities, witnessing community students who follow Jesus as Savior and Lord, Black Campus Ministry comes alongside side that and says, we affirm that. And we are also committed to helping InterVarsity reach Black students and faculty at majority institutions and historically Black colleges and universities nationwide. And really interested in seeing Black students laboring to be developed into extraordinary Black Christian leaders on campus and world changes in the world.
Yeah.
So that's Black Campus Ministry. And so there's some places where a BCM chapter, as we call it, not to be confused with Baptist Collegiate Ministry, is Black Campus Ministry chapter. A Black Campus Ministry chapter may exist on its own, or it exists within like a general chapter as like a few small groups or a coexisting student organization.
Okay.
So
where is it more likely to exist by itself? Would it be like an HBCU?
HBCU would be one, and that's just naturally. It's like, yeah, it's gonna be all mostly, if not all, Black students. So it exists by itself.
Okay.
And it depends on the history of a school.
Okay.
But as far as by itself, yes, it's most likely at a HBCU.
Okay.
But let me be clear about this though. Most of the Black students in America go to public universities, not necessarily HBCUs, but HBCUs produce some of the top, like the most doctorate and master's degree receiving students. And so both arenas are super important for us to think about in Black Campus Ministries.
Yeah.
And so that is why, there are some BCM chapters that exist by themselves and some that don't, but BCM is cares about all of it.
Yeah. There are some HBCUs that are also public universities, right? Like FAMU in Tallahassee, right? Okay.
Yes, you are correct. There's a number of them. I think there's one in North Carolina that's an HBCU, or at least it's an HBCU, or at least a predominantly Black serving institution.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier that you were involved in InterVarsity throughout your college experience. So I just want to know, what impact did that have on you, on your college experience?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it totally changed my college experience. To this day, I still believe the decisions that students make in college impact the next 40 years of their life.
Oh, wow.
And so what you do there sets the direction of your life. I came into college as a Christian who, I would say, really believed in God, but was more traditionally Christian rather than like heart inspired, submitted to the lordship of Jesus type Christian. So that means I'm gonna do the church thing, but it's more out of like routine.
Yes.
Instead of like, I have purpose here, I feel called and like an urging to be here for a specific reason. So when I came to college, my first year, man, I called myself a little wild. I wasn't like super wild. I was a little wild. I'll go to parties, I'll go to clubs, but I was going to church. So I was one of the Christians that people look at and say, like, look at that dude. That's why I don't like Christians. That's what if somebody really looked at my life, that's what they would say.
What do you mean? You mean he's saying that you have like one foot in the world, one foot out? Like, is that what you mean?
Something like that. Something like that. So I would go to clubs and things, and I had this weird philosophy that I wouldn't drink, I wouldn't do drugs, I wouldn't try to take anybody home with me or take anybody to bed, but I was gonna dance. So I love dancing. I was like, I'm gonna dance and have fun, and I'm gonna be in this place. And I did that a lot. I went to parties on campus. I went to parties. And so this was before I was going to an InterVarsity Bible study. I wasn't leading at that time. And I was going to church. And so I was doing the Christian traditional things. You go to church, you try to live a decent life. And you don't do, for me, it was like, I'm not going to do the big sins.
Yeah.
I'm not going I'm not gonna drink. I ain't gonna do drugs. I ain't gonna be sleep with
Just the little ones, huh?
everybody. Yeah. But the little one. Well, and the thing is, I think the Lord revealed to me like, these other ones might be. There's some ways in which you're just not thinking about life
Mm-hmm.
that you need to consider. And so I remember being in Ybor City, walking the streets late night one time, club hopping,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a younger guy who was like in high school who I knew at the church I was attending, and he saw me there, and he was like, "Wait a minute, what you doing here?"
Oh,
And
wow.
I remember just saying, I'm having fun," and then I
Mm-hmm.
kept walking.
Yeah.
Uh, but the way he asked, the way he looked at me, the surprise, it made me really think about how I was living life and some of the things that are going on around me. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not helping anybody while I'm here. I don't even know if like if there's a healthy outcome for me
Yeah.
here. Like if it produces something good in me, um, other than like an addiction to go and having a good time
Mm-hmm.
to relieve stress. Right. So I remember thinking about that, and then I started thinking a little bit more deeply about stuff. I started thinking about, man, like, going into this place, I basically look like everybody. My witness as a Christian is not being helped by this, and I realized the objectification of women in a club is just there, and
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything about it. In fact, I am not probably, I am just reinforcing that.
Yeah.
And so when I started thinking about things like that, I was like, I gotta figure this out. And it just so happens that after that first year of college, I was living this type of life where I was just living for myself. I was doing just traditional church things, and I was going to InterVarsity Bible study, and I was going to church. So, at the end of that year, that summer, I went to South Africa on a missions trip with the
Oh.
church back in Fort Myers.
Uh-huh.
Like, got connected.
You said it wrong. You said it wrong.
You say again?
You said Fort Myers wrong.
I did say Fort Myers right now. My church back in Fort Myers. Fort Myers. I went back. I went a church back in Fort Myers. My brother got connected to it. I went with this. I went with the Assemblies of God Church to South Africa
Mm-hmm.
with a group of guys who were to play basketball all around the certain part of the country and then share the gospel.
Oh.
First time doing something like that. I didn't really know what a mission trip was. I grew up in a small missionary Baptist church in the neighborhood I grew up in, and so mission trips were a little foreign to me, but I went because I was like, I can play basketball, and I like. And it was there towards the end of the trip. I had a moment. It was the first time I like shared my faith openly. I was building these significant relationships with the people around me.
Mm-hmm.
I saw God moving in some certain way, and I remember going to a church, and they had a call to faith. And by this time, I'm just excited that
Yeah.
God is moving to see. I mean, truthfully, the maybe the bigger thing that was going on internally is that I was in Africa, and
Mm-hmm.
I had never been around all
Yeah.
black people
Yeah.
running everything,
Yeah.
and I was like, I can stay here, God. And then to see him moving there, I was like, to be in a church where it's just a part of the service to dance, right? Like
Yeah.
traditional dance.
Yeah. It's very
I was
African.
like, God, you are bigger than I ever imagined. Like, he's big, but then when you experience and you realize just how big, it's like knowing a giant exists. But if you actually experience the giant, like face to face, it'll be a whole different thing.
Yeah.
So I knew God was big, but being there, kind of seeing how he's moving, I was like, wow, you're big. And then he said something to me. He was like, I remember the Lord speaking to me and saying, Brad, you actually know me. And I used to think about a lot of different things. I saw my church for what it was. I saw the good and the bad. I saw how Christian lived. I knew how I was living. And so there was a little bit of question to me about like, what is my faith? But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the Lord was just saying, hey, even in these places, even when your faith, when you're back at home and your faith, the biggest act of faith was like just being good in church.
Yeah.
Um, the guy was like, your faith is bigger than that, that there's more to it. And you know me. You don't have to doubt that you know me. Even it's come through a lot of different mediums, a lot of different people. You actually know me. And then he asked me a question that wrecked me. He said, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
And I was just like, whoa, wow. So to know the bigness of God, how
Mm-hmm.
great he is, And then for him to ask me, what am I doing in my life? It wrecked me, and it changed how I went back.
Yeah.
So I got back to the state. Um, I went to my church, and I confessed everything that happened my first year of college. I
Oh
let them know
wow.
everything I did in
Oh
front of the
boy.
church. I'm like, I'm bawling, I'm weeping, and that's when I was like, that's when the black church came through.
Yeah.
My church came through. Because there's a deacon in front just saying like, "That's all right, let it go, boy." There's another lady just like, "That's God cleansing,"
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just weeping and testifying. But the last thing I told the church was like, when I go back, I'm gonna be different.
Yeah.
And so I went back to University of South Florida, got involved with InterVarsity more deeply, and I just said yes to everything. That's it. I just was like, Lord, whatever you want to do, I'm gonna say yes.
Yeah.
And that's how I got involved with leadership. I got invited into leadership. I should say I did because I just said yes. So they was like, we need a place to have a Bible study in your dorm. I was like, I'll help you. Um, got them in the building. They was like, okay, we're going to go into your building. We're going to invite everybody in the dorm to a Bible study
Mm-hmm.
that going to have weekly. And we're going to do that by taking cookies to people and invite them to Bible study.
Oh wow.
So okay, I said, I said this in my heart because, of course, that's white people who said that. In my heart, I said, that's some white people stuff. I don't know what, I ain't never heard of that in my life. But I love that they loved well.
Yeah.
And so, with cookies in hand, we were just going and inviting people and generally interested in being in a relationship with them. And I saw how those leaders led Bible studies and helped people understand the word more. Saw how those leaders met with people outside of the Bible study, like to be genuine friends, how they provided some peer pastoral care. It's just a lot of things that happened. And so they invited me into leadership, and then I became a leader, and I started doing
Yeah.
leading on campus.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know what time you were in Ybor City, which is where our wider audience is in Tampa. But it's interesting because it's like if it was like 10 o'clock at night, you could have just been coming from a restaurant. There needs to be grace.
You're right.
There needs to be grace for us as Christians to be able to come out of a restaurant in Ybor City without judgment. So that's it.
Well, coming out of a restaurant at 10 or 11 or 12 o'clock at night is different. But you're right. I could have been.
Yeah.
I could have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
The guy used it.
Yeah. What's even more interesting is that, and this ties into my next question to you, that I asked you what was the impact of InterVarsity on you during your time as a student. And you started talking about this transformation in your life. But really, according to your story, the transformation in your life had a lot to do, actually, more so with your church back home than InterVarsity. And that's interesting because what I want to segue to is about the fact that a lot of students move away from their parents' faith and the faith of their childhood and the church of their childhood when they go to college. So it sounds like you didn't. It sounds like you still had that tie there somehow.
Yeah.
But why do you think that college is such a time of questioning for students in terms of their faith?
Can I first say, Soka, you very nicely and indirectly just like, you didn't really answer my question. That's what you just said. But I am going to answer your question as I answered this question. So, because your question was, why do students like, why is the faith challenge? What is it about college that
Yeah.
make students question their faith? That's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when I think about transformation, the first thing I think about is South Africa and what God did, and that involved a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
I would say InterVarsity was always that place that I could go. So it's like I was going to a Bible study before South Africa. I kept going,
Yeah.
and it was like students expressing and living out their faith on campus.
Yeah.
And that's what I needed. I need to be plugged into that.
Yeah.
Because my faith that I brought from home was like a faith that involved family.
Mm-hmm.
Like the church felt like a family. That's why I could go and testify in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a place where I learned a lot about God. I got to say my formative years about understanding and knowing the Bible front to back. It happened in church. But then when I got to campus, I would say this: at home, my faith was about church and being good.
Yeah.
I got to campus and it changed from, or not just be good, but like submit to God.
Mm-hmm.
Let Him lead your actual life.
Yes.
Put your faith in action. Don't believe that Jesus does miracles and you know where it's found in the Bible. actually live in a way where he has to do those miracles, where
Yeah.
you got to trust him to be miraculous.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that was really key for me because, and this is why I would say some students question their faith. In college is probably the first place that I experienced and that I think students experience good retorts to their faith or
Oh.
good reasoning for other options.
Yeah.
Um, Part of me can say good reason. Part of me say it's good reason because the first time they might hear something that's substantial that
Mm-hmm.
goes against their faith.
Yeah.
And so I think that happens. And then not only does that happen, but you meet people that are unique, creative, special,
Mm-hmm.
who are thinkers, and they live differently from you. They don't have your faith. So not only are you hearing ideas, but you're seeing people live in a way in a higher institution. So they're already living in a privileged place. A lot of students they experience people who are ambitious, professors who are good thinkers, but you're seeing people live and do things in a way that doesn't seem like it's uh sometimes it doesn't seem wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got somebody who doesn't believe and they're studying to be a researcher to find new cures for cancer. It's like that's good,
Yeah.
but they're an atheist,
Yeah.
and so and they have good reason for being an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
So when you experience something like that, your faith gets challenged. And I would say that challenge is a deeply intellectual challenge.
Yeah.
Uh, and so more than not, I see a lot of students have a faith crisis in college.
Oh, wow.
And this is where they start to question their faith because they realize how much of what I believe is tied to the environment I was in.
Yeah.
And that can wreck your world. And I've
Wow.
seen it wreck people's world. Now, on the other part of that is I think students need to have a faith crisis.
Yeah.
They also need to have a community to have that crisis
Mm-hmm.
because what a faith crisis does is allows your faith to become more real.
Yeah.
If you would dive deeper into Jesus. And
Yeah.
I think that's what InterVarsity provided, a place to ask questions, to have like a faith crisis type question, and then have people who are willing to give answers,
Yeah.
and are willing to walk with you as you question.
Yeah.
And I would probably say a lot of students walk away from faith in college because they don't have that community or they don't have their questions answered deeply and authentically, right?
Yeah.
So if I have a question about why is there evil in the world, Satan only gonna go so far.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get it. Satan is being, um, but God is powerful. Like they need something more. They need a deeper
Yeah.
answer than probably what they've experienced. I can say this for me. I don't know if I had like a significant faith crisis, but I did have questions that I needed answers to. And I
Yeah.
realized some of the stuff that I learned back at home, while good, was a starting point, a great starting point.
Yeah.
And I needed to push further. And
Yeah.
InterVarsity provided that type of space for me to push further and to think more deeply. And frankly, that led to me falling more in love with Jesus.
Yeah. It's almost as though there needs to be like a maturing that happens, going
Yeah.
from like that your childhood faith where it's like you're almost like you're relying on your parents' faith
Mm,
to now coming into, walking in faith on your own as an adult and, discovering who Jesus is, for yourself. That sounds like what you're
that-
saying. Yeah.
that's exactly it. That's exactly it. In my mind, I'm like, I'm preparing myself to tell my son, right, to as he grows and starts to understand faith, to make sure he knows, like, hey, this is a this is a place where it's okay that you start to think a little differently, that you want to question some things, ask your questions, find community answering them, and I think that's a good thing for parents of students. Don't try to protect them away from hard questions. Connect them to a place where they can actually find answers.
Yeah.
Have people that support them because, yeah, it's an environment where that most likely will happen. Um, and you don't have to run from it. You need to dive deep into those questions and find answers.
So where does InterVarsity fit in these faith crises?
Yeah. So when I was at University of South Florida, that we had a chapter. When I was a student, chapter was probably like I don't know, close to 100 students, maybe 20 leaders, 20, 25. I saw that chapter grow a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and as a group, we used to have these large group meetings, and we would use them in different ways. And so I think InterVarsity fits in a lot of different ways. I'll just name a couple. One, they provide spaces where they bring in folk who can answer those type
Yeah.
the kind of deep thinking type of questions,
Yeah.
right? Now, it should be said that these kind of events where you have a scholar or somebody come in and they answer questions, it often doesn't lead to like salvation
Yeah.
uh, or like somebody having like some kind of transformative
Mm-hmm.
uh, experience where they choose something radically different than what they thought. But it does knock down small barriers that could be, when you put them all together, could be significant barriers to
Yeah.
like finding Jesus. And
Okay.
so I think InterVarsity does a good job at doing things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the community the community that InterVarsity builds with students, and so the fact that student leaders are kind of our main driving force on campus.
Yeah.
And so when a student comes in and they realize, wait a minute, other students are living out their faith and leading this thing, um, there's a curiosity there. And then there's also people who have asked the same questions that they can talk with,
Yeah.
uh, and get deeper answers from. And so I think InterVarsity does a great job of being there in that way. And then, InterVarsity is bigger than just undergraduate ministry. There's graduate and faculty ministries.
Oh, I didn't know
And so
that.
yeah, and there's graduate students who lead on campus also. And they'll have events and things that they do where they talk more deeply about faith.
Yeah.
Um, and so, truthfully, when a student gets involved in a varsity, they actually have access not only to, I mean, we got online resources forever, but they also have access to real people who have asked real questions
Yeah.
and have found real answers. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one of the best things that InterVarsity provides.
Yeah. Especially if it's from your peers, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. When you have peers, right, it just changes when they can when you can have a
Yeah.
discussion that's not like not a lot is on the line other
Yeah.
than more understanding and love. Like it's like when you have your peers that can be with you in that way. And I've had a number of peers who ask deep questions, and we work through a lot of things, and we listen to different debates, and we just in our faith grew while we were on campus.
Yeah.
So yeah, peers are significant, and that's why in varsity. So for anybody who has students who are listening to this, or if there is a student who listens to this, one of the first things we do every year. So we're going to do it. School starts in the first 2-3 weeks. We're just out on campus asking students if they're interested
Oh,
in
okay.
Christian community,
Uh-huh.
and that's because we know. I said, the decisions students make in college will direct the next 40 years of their life.
Mm-hmm.
I also know that the decisions you make within the first 3 weeks of a semester will lead your year.
Oh,
And
wow.
so we try to make sure students know like there's a place for them, a Christian community for them on campus, by, by going out and being part of some of the first couple weeks activities, and let students know where we exist
Yeah.
and that we're available to them.
Yeah. So it sounds like the organization is very student led in terms of student leadership. So my question is then, how do you raise up student leaders?
Yeah, you got to take some risks
Mm-hmm.
with students, I believe. And so before I go into maybe some of the systematic type ways that we have to raise up student leaders, um, I think it's more of a belief question. It's like, do you believe
Mm-hmm.
that God can use those who He's already provided a way to be on campus? Do you think He can and He wants to use them to make a difference on campus?
Yeah.
Right. And so I would say every generation that comes across college campuses the beautiful thing about being part of InterVarsity, I get to see those generations and see their strengths and their weaknesses.
Yeah.
And while you see reports and everything about Generation Z, millennials, all you see those things that have come across. Um, I always, I always can't help but see their strengths because their strengths usually far outweigh their whatever the reported weakness is. Their
Yeah.
strengths usually outweigh it. Um, and I also see those young potential leaders who will be the next generation of church leaders, politicians, doctors, social movement leaders that will lead the world to change.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that you have to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the way we raise up leaders is that we take we reach out to students first. Once they're involved, we make sure that they get connected to a Bible study.
Yeah.
So I would say if I had talked to the system, it's like they get connected to a Bible study. They are part of what we do for a little bit, and then we have what we call an apprenticeship.
Oh.
So that is like for some places it's an actual class.
Oh, wow.
So the staff will lead a class that talks about what it looks like to be a Christian leader on campus.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, and then some folks apprenticeship is more like on the job training. So like during a semester, the student leaders who are leading Bible studies will actually include a new person who's shown the character and the commitment and the belief
Mm-hmm.
that they could be a leader. And so they walk along, they include them in their leadership a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, then after that, whether it be some places it's through like a student vote for the student leadership vote. For some other places, it's the staff and the student leaders who are inviting students. But after they've had some type of apprenticeship experience, then they're invited onto a leadership team. And once they're invited on a leadership team, but they're trained in how to lead a small group.
Oh, okay.
That means they're trained in how to study the Bible in a way that they can lead a Bible study with integrity
Oh, wow.
and within their ability and their knowledge of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they also learn about how to lead students in outreach, how to care for students who are
Oh,
attending their
wow.
Bible study, and also how to make calls to faith in their small group.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then finally, how to identify and call other leaders, that potential leaders in their small group, into leadership. And so like they're trained to be a leader, and then they lead,
Yeah.
and they're coached and discipled by staff who are assigned to that campus.
That's so impressive to me that all this training is happening and they're not just called up and then just thrown to the wolves, as it were, to just lead a Bible study. I love that they're trained up and that they're supported into
Yeah,
leadership. That's really amazing. And for a student to commit to that, it means that they're really serious about it also, So
yeah,
it's really
it is
amazing.
definitely it's kind of like that. We used to, when I was in college, no, they probably still do this, but they have like the weed out classes,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like that class that's super hard, and if you make it to the end and you pass, it's like
Yeah.
okay, maybe you can make it through the rest of this curriculum, this degree program.
Yeah.
And so, what's good about the apprenticeship, well, and we've learned this as we've been trying to build back up our apprenticeship program. We're still being affected. We
By
still
COVID.
seeing some of the effects of COVID,
Yeah.
but as we build out and kind of solidify some of our apprenticeship programs, we're learning that not only is it that, right? So a place where it's like, oh, if a leader makes it to the end, you can see whether or not they actually can be a leader. But we also can see where they're at in their faith journey and what's the next step for them.
Yeah.
And that's been also cool. So it's not like you either a leader or you're not. It's like maybe you're not a leader, but maybe you're supposed to like just volunteer and help in certain ways. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's like, yeah, go to a Bible study for another year because you just need to learn some things about Jesus and walk with him a little bit and walk in community. And
Yeah.
then let's explore leadership next time. So yeah, it's a apprenticeship is pretty key in our what I would call like our leadership pipeline
Yeah.
in InterVarsity.
Yeah. So when I led campus ministries in high school for 10 years, I was a sponsor of a Christian club. Most of the people who participated were students who came from, who their parents took them to church. They were involved
Yep.
in local churches. But there was also always a group of students who were not from Christian homes, but somebody brought them. Maybe they were even Muslim or, atheist, but somebody brought them, a friend invited them. Do you see a lot of that in InterVarsity?
Yeah, we do see a lot of that. Probably, and it might just because InterVarsity in some places probably seen as the most, I use this word very carefully, but liberal
Mm-hmm.
type organization. And that's not liberal in our theology necessarily. I'm just saying in terms of who we will interact with.
Yeah.
Um, because we see ourselves as like witnesses and so yeah, so for instance, Southeast, Rebuilding Ministry this past year had about 1,000 students across the Southeast involved with InterVarsity events. And we also saw 157 students make a decision to follow Jesus.
Oh, wow.
Now, some of these students, we're in the South, right?
Mm-hmm.
Bible Belt. Some of these students are students who are like me. They ride on their parents' faith. They want to make an adult decision to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
But none of them are, they did not know or they were not following Jesus and they made decisions to follow him. And so we are always trying to make sure we provide space for non-believers to feel safe to explore Jesus
Yeah.
in our small group. So, and that's another plus of having students lead small groups.
Mm-hmm.
Because a student, a non-believer, not believing student coming to a small group that's led by one of their friends feels much more safe
Yeah.
for them to kind of learn and ask questions. And so, yeah, we usually have a good amount of students who are not necessarily non-believers. We take leadership serious, so all of our leaders are believers.
Yeah.
But yeah, we usually have non-believing students who are part of our ministry. I get to see them. So as a regional director, I usually get to see students at some of our big regional events, and so we get to see them. I get to see them, and sometimes you got non-believers. Things can get dicey. Because
Interesting word.
they're not operating on a Christian morality.
Yeah.
So it's like I say I get to see them, but sometimes I have to walk with them.
Yeah.
Staff have to walk with them, and but that's all part of the joy
Yeah.
of seeing folk who don't know Jesus find him.
Yeah.
And it's just a blessing that we get to be part of that. That
Yeah.
we get to somehow walk with Jesus as he meets and changes students. So yes, non-believing students, we try to create a welcome environment. I'll say this though, there's oftentimes when a non-believer comes into our chapters, they're not necessarily looking to have some kind of conversion moment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times what they need first is just a place where they can find trust.
Yeah.
They can find trust. They can ask their questions, and not be shunned or looked down on,
Yeah.
but just find friendship and find trust.
Yeah.
And once they find trust, then they can maybe ask different questions
Yeah.
and take some different risks in the relationship.
Yeah.
And so for us, it's like, yeah, we have spaces, but we also try to be intentional in those spaces because we know Christians have hurt people that are outside of Christianity a lot. And we want to make sure that we provide a space where folk can have a place where they can feel loved
Mm-hmm.
as they walk towards, away, or around Jesus. But we want, as long as Jesus in the picture, we want to make sure they have a space where they have people that's walking with them.
Yeah. Never heard someone talk about somebody walking around Jesus. That's an interesting concept. Yeah. So, I was just wondering what kind of challenges, since who are part of InterVarsity as leaders or whatever, or InterVarsity itself may face on a college campus. Do you guys ever experience any kind of pushback from the school, from professors?
Oh, now you're asking deep questions. Okay. See if I don't get myself in trouble. Always, always.
Oh, wow.
Not everybody agrees with Christianity. Not
Yeah.
everybody agrees with how we, uh, the tenets of faith or how we go about leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There's been times where we have kind of doubled down on the fact that our leaders need to be actual Christians,
Yeah.
right? And that can seem, well, that has, I don't think I'm talking about anything that's not public knowledge or available publicly, but that has resulted in pushback often from campuses
Mm.
because of how they interpret their diversity and inclusion
Yes. I
policies,
see. Yeah.
right? And so there's been ways in which they've asked, say, hey, like, you can't discriminate in that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, but for us, it's been a place of where even with pushback, our heart is like, but we love the campus. We love
Yeah.
the people who work the campus.
Yeah.
We've been called to that. Like, God has called us to love the campus. So even if we're getting rejected, we want to figure out how we can still love. And so, yes, there's been pushback, especially, as morals and norms around sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
gender, around justice,
Mm-hmm.
and all this stuff. Like as it even around religion, as morals
Yeah.
around religion changes. We face pushback
Yeah.
um, throughout the country. What I've been really encouraged by in that is that in some cases, the fire that we experience has revealed genuine relationship.
Oh,
And
wow.
what I mean by that is, I remember there was a campus where we were experiencing some significant pushback.
Mm-hmm.
And we were experiencing significant pushback, so much so that faculty were planning to have a meeting to talk about whether or not InterVarsity should be on the campus.
Oh, wow.
And this was a incident involving InterVarsity stance on sexuality and things like that.
Yeah.
They had a meeting, but what happened was that a student representative from the Pride Alliance on the campus. So that's the student organization that kind of
Mm-hmm.
values and upholds homosexuality and provides space for students who identify as homosexual to uh, find a community and things like that. It
Yeah.
was that kind of student organization.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they came to that meeting because the university has some definite theological truths that it was standing on
Yeah.
as far as what we believe about sexuality, things like that. So this school was like, with that and how you require your students to be Christians and things like that, we got to figure out whether or not you should be on campus.
Yeah.
The reason why we stayed on campus was because a student from the Pride Alliance came and defended us
Oh, wow.
and said
It's amazing.
they definitely should be on campus. And part of that is because we had built a relationship with that
Mm-hmm.
group,
Yeah.
because they wanted a safe place for students who identify as homosexual
Mm-hmm.
to have a safe place to investigate Jesus,
Oh, okay.
right?
Wow.
So even though in the varsity chapter and that pride group had differing philosophies around sexuality
Mm-hmm.
and different beliefs around sexuality,
Yeah.
they was like, can we have a bridge like small group where students can explore?
Yeah.
Once they land somewhere, lovingly push them, or not push them, but lovingly send them to where they can go to a place where their beliefs align.
Yeah.
But to at least give them a space to investigate Jesus.
Yeah.
And because we were working that out with them and there was a relationship there, we got defended by them at that campus and was able to stay.
Oh, wow.
So, we live in a world where people just choose a side, right?
Yeah. It's black or white, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, I think there's a lot of people on the ground who are doing work where they can stay in the middle of it all
Yeah.
with their beliefs and
Mhm.
uphold their beliefs with integrity, but not exclude people or exclude relationships that could be beneficial.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm seeing that in a number of places.
Yeah.
So when we talk about pushback, I'm like, yeah, there's pushback, but we try to choose love in whatever way that looks.
Yeah.
Um,
So building
so,
bridges, as you said,
yep, yep.
is very important. That's such a powerful testimony. So if somebody's listening to this and they like think, I want to give to this cause, or if there's a need for a local InterVarsity chapter next to me, I want to, help them fulfill that need. What would you say to that person in terms of how they can help further this ministry?
Yeah. So one, go to intervarsity.org.
Mm-hmm.
So for your question about if there's a campus near them, because InterVarsity not on every campus, but
Yeah.
like I said, it's probably somebody close or who is thinking about that. And so they go to intervarsity.org. They can, you have to follow the links to get to look for a campus. And when you look for a campus, it'll show you what staff worker and the contact information for that staff worker is either on that campus or near it.
Yeah.
So as far as looking for a campus that's near you and trying to figure out where InterVarsity is, that's the best way. Go to intervarsity.org. If they want to support the work of InterVarsity, it depends. Locally, if you wanted to support, again, you can go to intervarsity.org page and find information there.
Mm-hmm.
For the work that I do, if you want to support the Southeast, so all those states I named, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Panhandle of Florida. I have a website. You can go to bradfordeverett.com,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a donate link on there to give. But you could also, again, easily go to intervarsity.org. Now, I wanted to make sure I said that and not forget it. But I think people give in different ways.
Yeah.
And so I'll name you the 4 ways that folk give. So one is advocacy.
Yeah.
InterVarsity, it tends to be a pretty shy organization. People usually, when they hear InterVarsity, they think, "Oh, you're a sports club," and we had to say no. It's called InterVarsity because it started in England, where they call colleges varsities, and it's a big explanation for that.
Yeah.
But we go by advocacy, and so folk who believe and love what we do, telling other people about what we do.
Yeah.
And connecting us to people who can give, or people who might want to be involved. So advocacy goes a long way.
Yeah.
And then there's prayer. Can never have enough prayer.
Yeah.
There, man, from the demonic to just the well-being of students to the health and safety and continued well-being of staff who do the work, like all those things need to be covered in prayer.
Yeah.
And so we value prayer significantly. And so having prayer partners out there works, both anonymous, but also if you're praying for a campus to let staff know that you're praying for it. So that's another reason to reach out. So even if you're just like, I don't know if I can give money, but I can pray. Yeah. Find whoever is the staff around and let them know that you're praying, and even maybe ask them to send you their prayer letters and updates so that you can know what to pray for. So prayer is significant. And then serving. So folks serve alongside of us all the time. We have volunteers. Some volunteers who actually use, they use 3 hours a week to do some work on campus.
Yeah.
So they'll prayer walk a campus, or
wow.
they might actually lead a Bible study on campus with students.
Wow.
And so serving is a significant way to get. And so that's like volunteering, like I said, as a campus, to be a volunteer staff at a campus, or something as simple as like, I'm gonna like give you, I'm gonna make food and give you some things for when you're doing different activities on campus. So serving is always significant. And then the last thing is what I said before, is giving. We every staff who comes on, InterVarsity staff, raises a large part of their own budgets. And so, and those budgets doesn't just cover their compensation, but it covers the different needs that come up on campus.
Yeah.
And so folk who are philanthropic at heart, or who can give a little. So I have folk who support me at $10 a month. And then I have folk who support me at $300 a month. So it's and they're not just supporting me; they're supporting the work of Jesus throughout the Southeast.
Yeah.
And so those are the ways to give.
That's good information. So I just want to thank you so much, Brad Everett, for taking the time today to tell us all about campus ministry, specifically InterVarsity Christian Fellowship.
Yep.
There was something that you said earlier that just reminded me of my own experience. You mentioned, you were talking about I don't even know which generation we're on, Gen Z,
I think I'm like Gen X, millennial.
Yeah.
I don't know where you at.
Whatever this generation is that's coming up now. And it just reminded me of, as I said earlier, for 10 years, I sponsored a Christian club on a public high school. And
Yep.
I remember two things. Number one, every year our leaders would graduate and I'd be like, where are we going to get people like this? Where are we going to? And then every year God would raise new people up. And I was just always in awe and amazed. And then the other thing was that every year when we would go out and canvass the school, advertise the club at the beginning of the school year during club rush time, and then it was time for the first club meeting. I'm thinking nobody's going to come. These kids are not going to be interested in sitting and listen to some dude talk about Jesus and seeing some of their peers lead worship. But every year, especially the first few meetings, that hall would have at least 100 students. And it would actually bring me to tears just thinking that this generation, they still are hungry for Jesus and they still care despite what people say about this generation.
Yes.
So
yes, you are exactly right. This generation is hungry for Jesus. The interesting thing is that I'm realizing every generation wants more of real Jesus.
Yeah.
Less of the fake or just the traditional. Is like, give me real Jesus that's going to be real in my whole life. So I'm with you. I didn't know we had that in common. I didn't know we had that in common.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I really strongly believe in what you're doing. I think it's so important to have the campus ministries in universities and colleges, and I just pray that it continues to grow. So thank you so much for telling us about all the wonderful things that are happening.
Amen. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Education Today. We'll be back next time with more current topics on all things education. In the meantime, you can email any questions or comments you have about the show to edtodaypodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, please hit the subscribe button and consider leaving a review on whichever platform you are listening. We are listener supported, so if you are able to give a one-time or monthly donation, check out the show notes for ways in which you can give. Check out my blog for more about my experiences in education at medium.com/@SOHKOR. That's medium.com/@SOHKOR. You can also find me on Instagram at SOHKOR_rights. That's at SOHKOR_rights. See you next time, and thank you again for listening.